Rick and Rionette are now here in the exam center, where they are told that the results of the exam will soon be announced through their exam cards. If somebody passes, their card will glow intensely, and those candidates will be eligible for the next round. Anything else would mean that the candidate has failed the exam. Rick gets worried, thinking he might have failed the exam or not, since it's a while that his card didn't glow. But Rionette tries to reassure him that he did very well in his exam, so he doesn't need to be worried. Rick begins to think that she is a very nice person because she always tries to make him feel better, and if he was 10 years younger, he would totally marry her. But she also has her scary side, as she threatens to triple his training if he somehow managed to fail. A few moments later, Rick's card begins to glow, and he picks it up in anticipation and excitement. And he's glad to know that he has successfully passed the first stage exam. After that, Rick leaves the hall with Rionette, but as he is outside, a dreadful smell fills his nose. He looks over and sees a rich dude walking straight up to Rionette, and he immediately introduces himself as the eldest son of the Diarmuid family, Raster Diarmuid. Now, Rick has started to think that he has already dealt with the 2 Diarmuid family members, but again, another one came up to mess with him. Surprisingly, this time, Raster isn't here for Rick. He's here to shoot his shot with Rionette. Rick tries to introduce himself to Raster, but Raster wants nothing to do with a muscular middle-aged man, so he goes back to talking to Rionette and tells her how much he is in love with her huge jugs. Sorry, he meant to say personality and characteristics, so he wants her to come with him so she can become his second wife. And this is where it gets personal for Rick, since he doesn't want to lose his girl to someone like Raster. So he steps in front of him and says she is his girlfriend, so he has no right to shoot his shot on her. Hearing this, Raster stood for a second and looks down, then he sees Rick is holding an exam card in his hand, which means he is still an F-rank adventurer, and he finds it hilarious that someone like him in this age is still an F-rank adventurer. Rick tries to defend himself by saying that Raster is also a bit old for taking this exam, since he looks like a 25-year-old man. Here Rick is thinking Raster is also a contender around here. So Raster begins to laugh at him and says he is not here to compete with anyone, since he's already passed this ranks back when he was just 14. So he's actually an A-rank adventurer, and he is here as an instructor for the second part of the exam. Now, believing he has asserted some dominance over Rick, Raster turns back to Rionette and asks her if she would like to join him for the dinner or not. But Rionette shuts him down and says the only man she will go with is Rick. Now Raster becomes enraged, and he can't accept that he won't be getting Rionette to go with him. So he swears that if he ends up getting in charge of Rick's exam, then he will make sure that Rick will suffer as much as possible, and that definitely going to make Rionette love him. After Raster walks off, Rick prays that he doesn't have to deal with him during the exam. Then he notices that Rionette is still clinging on to him, so he jumps back with embarrassment, apologizes to Rionette for calling her his girlfriend. But Rionette says he doesn't have to be sorry for this, since he did it to get rid of Raster, and that made her really happy, because he's not a good guy, nor he is loyal to someone, because he already married and wants to make her his second wife just to fulfill his desires. So, she thanks Rick instead. Meanwhile, Raster filled with anger since he couldn't get Rionette to be his second wife, and furthermore, he lost her to a middle-aged man like Rick. So he feels disgusted. Just then, his 2 siblings came running up to him and said an old man was messing with them during the exam, while Angelica complains that the old man beat her in a duel and tries to make her his servant for the rest of her life. Although, she was the one who made the bet to begin with. Now the way that they're saying it makes it sound like they didn't do anything wrong either. So Raster is outraged that someone would dare to humiliate his family, but when he learns that the one who did this is none other than Rick, a strange grin on his face starts to show. While later, the mock battles are about to begin, and Rick is really nervous about it. But Rionette tells him to make sure he will hold back during the exam. Rick isn't understood what the hell she's saying. He still thinks he is not that strong now to hold back against the same level adventurers, even some of them are pretty strong as comparing to him. So, in this situation, if he tries to hold back, the other ones will definitely utilize this opportunity, and that'll going to lead him to fail. So holding back against them now will be a foolish mistake. Also, he has to worry about Raster, because he's not an easygoing person since how serious he was for putting him in trouble, so he definitely should be careful with him, because who knows what he's cooking in his mind. And it would be terrible if he becomes the one in charge of his exam. Just then, Rick and Rionette comes into a person named Lynx Larot, and he was looking for them so long to meet with, and he also says he will be the one in charge of Rick's exam. Hearing this, Rick instantly begins celebrating in no time, because that's the only thing he wants right now. Lynx goes to say that he was pretty surprised when he knew about Rick, that the man has quit his job to become an adventurer in his 30s. So he was wanting to see him. Now, here he is. But he's not here to say that this is a bad thing to do. In fact, he believes this is so inspiring that Rick still has the determination to work towards his dreams, and he can relate to it since he is also in the similar age. Lynx became an adventurer when he was 24, but in the last 20 years since then, he has only been able to achieve the B rank. So, if he wants to accomplish his goal to get to the A rank, he must work hard, and it's never too late for this. Seeing Rick working so hard for his dreams and goals has motivated him to do his best as well, and he is excited to test Rick in the upcoming mock battles, but he won't be going easy on him. However, around the corner we see Raster is hiddenly listening to their conversation with insidious thoughts in his mind. As Rick and Rionette went away, Lynx walks down the dark stairwell, and out of nowhere Raster shows up in front of him, with a proposal which doubles as a threat. At the same time, Rick and Rionette were waiting in the locker room, and Rick seems to be in a much better mood than he was earlier. Because he got Lynx as his instructor who supports him and admires him for his work. And furthermore, he doesn't have to deal with Raster anymore. But however, a few moments later, someone comes in to announce that Lynx Larat has suddenly fallen ill, so he won't be able to act as an instructor anymore. In his place, Mr. Raster has been assigned to take over their exam. Hearing this, Rick starts to freak out once more, and Rionette mentions that Raster must have pulled some illegal strings to make this happen, since he wants Rick to fail any way possible, and he also related to Angelica and Freed that Rick has already dealt with. So, he may be seeking some revenge on Rick. Now, the other examinees in the room also begins talking that how terrible it is to have Raster as their instructor, since he may be a dignified member of the Diarmut family, but he also known for how much he enjoys beating up F-rank adventurers. Every single year, he picks a particular adventurer to mess with, and does everything in his power to make them fail. Now, who knows which person has become his prey for this exam? Hearing this, Rick clearly realizes that he is the one whom Raster is preying on, and he's definitely the most hated one than any other of his targets before. Sometimes later, as Raster was outside tormenting a random examin, he fires a barrage of ice blasts and knocks the guy out, but just as he was insulting the examin for being so weak. His fun gets interrupted as he receives a message from the elite guard. Meanwhile, Rick is strolling around the corridor with Rionette sitting nearby, as his turn is coming soon and he doesn't know how he is going to handle. Raster makes him much worried about the battle. Rionette doesn't understand what Rick is so worried about, because he just only needs to beat Raster. However, Rick thinks beating Raster is impossible for someone like him, since he is a well-skilled and powerful A-rank adventurer, while he is only an F-rank adventurer, and also Raster is probably more powerful than the other examiners as well. Rick now begins to think that he will die if he faces Raster, but if he backs out he will have to do 3 times more than his normal training again. It seems like Rick is breaking down, all in instant. So, Rionette kindly sits in front of him and asks him if he really isn't confident in his skills, and if he really isn't have faith in himself. Rick now says he sincerely believes that he is an incompatible adventurer since he switched to this job too late in his life, and every person is telling him that he is too old to do this. But Rionette tells him that he shouldn't let what other people think of him shakes his confidence. And he's wrong that everyone disbelieves him since she always believes in him, the party always believes in him, and she saw a fire inside him that is able to burn any challenges into ashes. Your dreams are bigger than your age, Rick. You have the thing that no one has, and that's your immense passion for becoming an adventurer. To become a hero, to conquer the evils. Now you cannot step back after all those things you have been through for this. Now, please have faith in yourself. Have faith in your skills. Have faith in those extreme unimaginable training you have been through, and have faith in your extreme hard works and struggles. You have to believe in yourself, Rick, because all that matters is that she believes in him. Rick's now feeling much better and confident in himself, and he thanks her for her kind words. He admires her support and trust, and he knows now that no one can beat him as long as she's with him. Just then, when they're talking, a cloak boy approaches Rick and offers him a free fortune-telling for his upcoming moments. Rick thinks for a second and agrees to accept the offer since he doesn't find a big threat in this thing, and it could be a fun game. So, despite this whole thing being really suspicious, Rick decided to go along with it. But however, as Rick is about to sit down, O.N.A notices a magic circle on the chair, so she tries to warn Rick that it could be a trap, but she ends up being too late as Rick is teleported away instantly. After that, the boy reveals his identity and we get to know that it's none other than Freed in disguise. Freed says he is quite pleased with himself for being able to trick Rick into falling for his trap. However, he should have planned to teleport Rick as far as possible. Maybe on another planet. O.N.A gets extremely angry and while holding him by the collar, she asks him where did he send Rick by his magic. Freed instantly refuses to tell her with arrogance in his face. So, O.N.A teaches this stupid kid a small lesson by cutting a tiny piece of his eyelash, stating she can cut him into pieces in a blink of an eye without a second thought if he continues to test her patience. Now, realizing she's not an ordinary woman and she looks even more powerful than Rick, Freed gets afraid by her dangerous look.